Remember this. This would come out pretty much every month from the late 80s to the early 90s. Jim Marshall's favorite Marshall. And what he says it is, past and present, it's always been the original. So I can't really understand why the demand is so great for the amps made in the 60s. Marshall built the 4x12. They made the 4x12. Let that sit in for a minute. Hey everybody, it is Derek over at Masters of Shred, and I want to thank you for tuning in to what will be a very special, I guess you could say, episode of Pages of Time, because it involves just me. That's right, no special guest today. We had put a question out on our YouTube community page now, which you can find on our YouTube channel if you don't subscribe. So already subscribe and start participating on there. And I asked everybody, what do you want to see me review? We have a couple different Ibanez catalogs, and I have a Marshall catalog. And you guys have spoken, and that's what we're going to go over today. Now, what I do urge you to do is if you want to support this channel, the easiest way to do it is to hit that subscribe button. No, shred that subscribe button. Give this video a like, give it a thumbs up, share it with a friend. It's the easiest way to grow with this channel and never have to open up your wallet. But if you do want to open up your wallet, we got some pretty cool options you want to stay tuned for at the end of this video that you may just like for instance, this awesome Shred Class of '89 shirt that you can only get at www.mastersofshred.com. So we're going to hop right into it, folks. We're going to go back to 1987, and what are we going to look at? Well, before I go into it too much, let me give you a little bit of a background on what's going on. The mighty Guns N' Roses just dropped Appetite for Destruction and turned the rock world upside down on its head. And guess what? To my belief and many others, Slash made the Les Paul a monster guitar again, which is so cool to this day. I don't think people realize how influential Slash was in getting that guitar back to the masses when everyone was playing ESPs, Ibanez's, and Kramers. And Casios were actually a pretty popular watch for a lot of folks. So that's what's going on. But outside of that, Marshall was throwing their hat into the modded amp world with their Jubilee release, as they entered 25 years as an amp maker. And what did they put out? Nothing other than their monthly promotional publication called Marshall Law. That's right. Not sure if you guys remember this. This would come out pretty much every month from the late 80s to the early 90s. And if you were a fan, this was telling you about new product releases. This was telling you about artist news. Remember, we didn't have social media back then. This is what you had. You had this, and you had rock magazines. That's how you found out all the cool stuff about your favorite players. So this is what we got. And this one is volume 4, number 2. So the way I believe this works is that this would actually happen February of 1987. Now we're going to dive right in, folks. If you've seen this channel before, you know how this works. It's Pages in Time. We go over the pictures, the articles. We go over the news, the gear. We reflect. We hop into a total abyss of dark, unadulterated nostalgia. And I invite you to come and join me for it. So let's just hop right into this. So right off the bat on the front cover, what an epic shot. We got Jim Marshall right here in the flesh, hand to hand with the mighty Yngwie Malmsteen. And this was taken by Glenn LaFerman, one of the most iconic rock photographers of that time, along with a couple other ones like Mark Weiss, and I always say his name wrong, Neil Zlodger.
What's the matter with you?
Zlodger? Niels Lau. That's what I'm going to call it. All iconic photographers still are today. But this is a great shot. Now, what's wild about this is, this issue was in 1987. I'm assuming it would be volume 4, number 2. So we will be talking about February. Yngwie would be in a really bad car accident just a couple months later on June 22nd in California when he crashed his Jaguar into a tree, put him in a coma for a week or two, and damaged his picking hand. Luckily, that's not his picking hand, and clearly this is not after the accident, so he is arm wrestling with his left arm. Just a little food for thought. That accident took place, I believe, right after he put out Trilogy, which didn't help in getting that album promoted for him because, you know, he hurt himself, had to rehabilitate everything, teach himself how to play again and get his speed back, and he did it. And the rest is history. I mean, most people don't even talk about that accident or even remember it because, you know, Yngwie got on his feet quickly and went right back at it. And Odyssey would come out, the Odyssey album, in 1988. So very cool stuff there. Very cool classic shot. And we're going to learn a bit more about that as we dive in. But look at the names we got on here. Steve Vai, Richie Sambora, Pat Buchanan, Bob Bradshaw. Yep, the rig rack king, the guy who set up everybody's rigs, especially after this. Because in 1988, artists had full-on rig racks. It wasn't just choruses and your delay in your rack. This was everything. You saw Steve Lukather had it. A lot of guys had that. And Bob Bradshaw was the guy you go to. Even in our episode of Talking Shred with Red Beach, he talks about this. How much money he spent on his Bob Bradshaw rig, and I think he ended up selling it for a couple of $100s when he needed the money, and he spent thousands on it. But Bob is the guy. So very, very cool to see there. Got the fix, the new Jubilee rack mounts, bass amps. Let's just hop right into it. Something else very cool here too. This was published by Korg USA. Korg was the U.S. distributor for Marshall amps until 2010. So that's why they were in charge of this publication. All right, hopping right into it. What do we got here? We got Buddy Guy, the blues legend. Buddy Guy. What's weird about this picture? He's got a Marshall JCM 800. He was not known for playing a JCM 800. Nowhere does it talk about him playing a JCM 800 on the internet to really any large degree. He was a Fender twin guy. Now, when I saw this, I started laughing because you know what? I have a piece of memorabilia in here that I picked up a couple of years ago that you guys are going to get a kick out of. And I took it off my wall just to show you. Check this out. To show you how even blues players were adapting to the shred craze. Because I think a JCM 800, I don't think a blues player. I'm thinking Zakk Wylde. I'm thinking metal, in-your-face, hair metal guys. That's what I'm going for. You got a blues guy there. This also is Buddy Guy in 1995 with an ESP. That's right. Buddy Guy with an ESP. What has the world come to? That was the day and age, folks. That's what it was. But pretty wild shot. And I saw it, I said, I got to get that. And I've never seen this picture anywhere else before, and I still can't find it to this day. So you saw it here first, folks. But hopping right into it, we're going a little bit of Steve Vai. He gets dirty with his Marshall. And we're talking about in this article, he's hot off the press with Even Smile in 86. He's touring the country. They mention how he is usually using a different amp, which would be his Carvin X100B, very popular, but he still relies on his Marshall's preamp section of a Marshall amplifier for his rig. And they even refer to some articles that he had spoken about this in Guitar for the Practicing Musician. So, you know, and here we go again, Marshalls were modified by Jose Arredondo. And I probably got that wrong, and I'm so sorry if I butchered your name. And, of course, Lee Jackson on the David Lee Roth album. And modding amps was very big at this time. You started seeing Lee Jackson modding them, and everyone taking these Marshalls and going all the way with them. So Marshall opened their eyes to it and said, okay, let's try something here. Let's put out these Jubilees models, and maybe this is the answer to that. And you're going to learn a little bit more about their thoughts on the whole hot rodding thing at that time, and where they came into the mix, because they do talk about it in here. Now, what's really cool, too, is that in 1988, the Slow 100 would just go through the roof with that Soldano, and the rest was history. You got Warren DeMartini, you got George Lynch playing through this thing, and countless other shred extraordinaires. Soldano just took it to the limit with the Slow 100. And, of course, Eddie would use it in the early 90s for a brief period, too. So, a lot of history there with hot rodding amps, and that was the culture right here in at this time. Here's something else that's very cool. We talk about Bob Bradshaw, and his master of effects becomes Micro Man. That's right. So it talks about how Bob Bradshaw, the LA-based creator of custom guitar effect systems for the Stars, recently took delivery of his 6 Marshall Micro Stack for use in one of his coveted pedal boards. So the particular system featured a Marshall Jubilee amplifier specially modified for rack mounting and was commissioned by Andy Summers of the Police. And he basically gave him carte blanche in a conversation with Marshall Law. He said, I scare people with that little 12-watt head. People just can't believe it sounds that big. It's amazing. It's set up for separate sounds so you can foot switch from the micro head to the Jubilee 50-watter. You know what's so cool about that? I actually had one of those. And I don't have it anymore, but man, those micro stacks, especially from that time, they do sound big, those 12 waters. They're awesome. I had one that looked like a Plexi. It was really aged, really great, cool micro that even, you're not going to take it out to a gig, but to have it in your shred den, it's awesome. Very cool amps. Let me know if you guys have a micro Marshall stack from back in the day in the comments section below. We also hear a little bit more about the fix here. Talk about that. His 2 Marshall 50 waters. Again, a lot of support and love for Marshall, clearly. This is the Marshall Quickies. We're going to talk about Steve. We're going to talk about Bob Bradshaw. We're going to go to the next page. Oh, here we go. Bon Jovi Sambora flying high with Marshall. That is right. Slippery When Wet came out. They were killing it. Living on a Prayer. You Give Love a Bad Name. And Richie says he still points out in a recent Guitar World article, my amps are all 100-watt Marshalls. Funny story, though. This story changed a little later in the year because he would sign an endorsement deal with KMD Amps. And who is KMD Amps? Good question. Not many people know. They're very hard to find. They seem like a cash grab. They were just throwing money at artists at the time, and a lot of people were signing up but never actually using those amps. So I take that back. Richie was probably still using Marshalls on tour with Bon Jovi, and I don't know if I ever actually saw him with a KMD amp other than the ads that are in all these guitar magazines, but he did sign a deal later on this exact year with KMD amps, which are owned by Command, who did strings, and they had Scotty Hill and Snake Sabo also endorsed through them. So they're throwing money out to everybody for endorsement deals, but very funny to see. And right here, this man won a Marshall. That's right, he's another winner of a Marshall. Kevin Blever of Hawthorne, California. Where is he now? Hey, if Kevin Wasatch is watching this channel, that would be so cool. And if you are, drop a comment. So will the real Kevin Blever please stand up, drop a comment down below. But check this out. Up here, too, we learned the first Jubilee amp sold ever. And this man got it. Doug Timmer of Hollywood, California, the world's first person to buy a Marshall Jubilee amplifier. They were released this year. He chose JS2555, 100-watt and 50-watt with the 4x12 cabinet with Marshall vintage speakers. Could you imagine what he was thinking when he went to his guitar store? He probably saw the ads coming up. They're going to release this Jubilee. And then all of a sudden, he walks in and all I'm picturing is like balloons falling and, sparkles and fireworks, maybe some sparklers in there, and some nice music. I'm sure that probably didn't happen at all. It's probably just went something like the cashier saying, oh, yeah, by the way, you're the first one to buy this. Can we get a picture? Maybe not, though. Maybe he's out there. Maybe he's watching. Maybe Doug Timmer can weigh in on this. I'd like to know what he thinks, but that's very cool. I mean, gosh, if he still has that amp today and this article is out there, what a cool piece of just nostalgic memorabilia to have. I would frame this, put it next to that amp. Very cool. We also have the Marshall Stack Landmark, where they're talking about just how influential this amp was. And really, what a big part Pete Townsend from The Who was in Marshall's rich legacy and their growth. I mean, so many of the products Marshall put out were focused around requests that Pete Townsend had when he was on tour. So very, very cool to see that. And this is what we're talking about here. We got the Southern Star on the horizon. Atlanta-based guitarist and songwriter Pat Buchanan, a longtime Marshall user. And who did he play guitar for? None other than Cameo. That's right. The song Word Up. And if you don't remember, here's a little taste.
Come on, baby, tell me what's the word up, word up.
Told you. It's actually a kicker of a song. But if you watch the video for Candy, the track Candy, you will see him tear up into a nasty solo with some nice, tasty tapping work and whammy bar usage. Pretty cool. I may actually have to post it on Masters of Shred, so make sure to follow us on our Instagram too, where I can get that video up there, and you guys can check it all out. But we learned a little bit about him. He's from Tallahassee, where he studied at, and he's up and coming. The Candyman, Pat Buchanan. Ah, here we go. Check this out. The Jim Marshall Then and Now interview. Now, this interview is really, really cool. There's a lot of good information in this that I didn't know, that I'm learning for the first time, as maybe many of you were when you first saw this in person, back in '87, you were reading this. Very cool stuff. So going through this, we learn about Jim. We learn about what he did, what was his background. He was a drummer. Jim was a drummer. Jim would give lessons, and Jim actually started a drum store where they would do lessons. He started teaching other drummers, but these other drummers were bringing in their band members, and these band members were guys like Pete Townsend. And here we go right here. Was one of the first to come into my shop because he was playing with Richie Blackmore. So you're getting the drummers for all of these bands coming in, and then, kind of talking Jim's ear off a bit about why don't you stock guitars too? And it's just crazy to me because it is wild that he became an amp maker when he plays drums, gave drum lessons, and had a drum store. You'd think he could just make drums. But as we learn a little bit more, there was a reason he didn't want to do that. But going back into it, Pete Townsend said, why don't you stock guitars and amplifiers? And again, he says he knew nothing about it. But people were asking for Gibsons and Fenders, usually Stratocaster guitars, and Gibson semi-acoustics. So this started to get the light bulb in his head about, you know what, maybe I should do this. So they asked him, though, did you sell anything that you built yourself? And the answer is really not immediately. There were no real amps being produced in those days for bass guitar. Bass guitarists used to complain that they were being outgunned all the time by lead guitarists, and they asked me for help. So I started building my own bass cabinets. They generally started as an 18-inch speaker in a very small enclosure, completely packed with sawdust and wood shavings. And the back of the speaker cone was covered with a canvas bag to prevent wood shavings from getting inside. So very cool. Now, again, they're getting into this, just how did he start doing this? Where'd that first Marshall come from? And he goes, were you building Marshall amps before the Marshall line was known for guitar amps, which is prior to 1962? And he said, yes, there were some called a linear, which was a sort of a death trap. And he talks to Ken, and Ken is the chief engineer for Marshall at that time. And not the world's best amps. But they said, they asked, why did you decide to build your own amplifiers? And he said that Ken told me it seemed silly to keep on buying amplifiers when we could probably produce our own. So I asked Ken to produce something and let me listen to it. And they were looking for that sound, and then finally they got it. And we even talk about when they built their first 4x12. That's right. Marshall built the 4x12. They made the 4x12. Let that sit in for a moment. Marshall created the 4x12. Yeah, before that, everything was on a 2x12 format, like the Fender twin amps and what have you. A 4x12. I wish I was a fly in the room for that light bulb moment. But they talk about it and how it's simply the most convenient size for the transport groups had available in those days. And he thought it didn't look very nice with the amp just sitting on top of the cabinet, so he angled the grill to match the amp's dimensions and make it a neater package. And this article goes on to, over here,
hey everybody, just a quick reminder, if you'd like to show your support for this channel, and we'd love it if you would, make sure to check out our limited edition Masters of Shred merchandise at www.mastersofshred.com. You can snag an awesome shirt like this incredible Shred Class of '89 ADA Throwback Tribute, or plenty of other ones that you will not find anywhere else. So check that out, and while you're there, make sure to check out our incredible limited edition Tone Arts USA Super Halen amp. Only 50 will be available, and they are going quick. Now back to the show.
And this is cool too. Ken says there were only two popular groups we didn't have at that time, the Beatles and the Animals. And they talked about, again, Pete Townsend. And Jim says, I know Pete Townsend for many years because I used to play with his father, who was a very good alto clarinet player. Small world. And it says, what is Townsend? It was Townsend who asked for the first 8x12s. And this is a story of the full stack, folks. Very cool story if you didn't know already. And his answer, Jim's answer, is yes, in 1965, Pete still wanted more power, so we developed the first 100-watt amp. That's right, Marshall made the first 100-watt amp. Again, who's at the focus of this? Pete Townsend of The Who. So interesting, so cool to learn this. And he says he also wanted something bigger in terms of cabinets, 8x12s specifically. I thought that would create problems in terms of handling, and sure enough, the roadies complained. A few weeks later, Peter returned and said, you were right, but can you still give me the same height in two cabinets? Genius. Again, light bulb moment. He wanted it simply cut in half, which was impossible, so the stack was really just a combination of Pete's and my design ideas. Originally, we built the stacks more for looks and as a backdrop more than anything else. And there we go. There's the full stack. 2 separate 4x12s. Very cool. So we go through here. Another great story. He's talking about when he first met Jimi Hendrix and how much Jimi Hendrix helped the Marshall brand, which I don't think you can argue with at all. I really don't think so. But it's just pretty funny. He said, Jimmy told me he wanted to use Marshall gear and that he was going to be one of the top people in the world for this type of music. I thought he was just another one trying to get something for nothing. But in the next breath, he told me he wanted to pay for everything he got. That is very, very cool. So as I mentioned earlier, why did Jim Marshall not make drums? He owns a drum store. He gives drum lessons. Sells drums. Why don't you just make drums? And to show you the kind of guy that he is, a very loyal guy, look what he wrote down here. He said, I suppose it would have been a natural thing for me to do, being a toolmaker, a drummer, having a drum school, and selling so many drums. But I was very friendly with the owners of the premier drum company and didn't want to conflict with that friendship. Wow. So the kind of guy Jim Marshall is. Pretty stand up. You don't see that often. Very cool. We talk about the Rock Walk of Fame in front of the Guitar Center that they had just put out there in November of 1985. And also in 1984 as an award given by Queen for outstanding technical or export achievements. And that's why they had the Queen's award logo on their letterhead and on advertisements, which is pretty cool, interesting to see as well. And look at this. Oh, man. So you got everyone's signature on this, right, folks? It's 25 years of making amps, 50 years in the music industry. It's a silver jubilee. They put it out in 1987. And thank you, Jim Marshall. Thank you, Jim Marshall, for making the only amps that matter. We got Les Paul in here. We got Steve Walsh from Kansas. We got Ted Nugent. We got Buddy Guy. We got Steve Morris. We got Eddie Van Halen. I couldn't have done it without you, Eddie Van Halen. Super cool. We got Eddie Martinez, Robert Plant, Yngwie Malmsteen. Didn't really have much to say. George Lynch, it didn't really have much to say. Just signed his name there. But Pat Thrall did. To Jim, it couldn't have happened without you. So him and Eddie feel the same way. Pat Thrall, Eddie Van Halen, maybe Jimmy too, the same there. Who knows? Eric Johnson, Elliot Easton, McCars. I mean, it's Steve Stevens, Billy Idol. Here's to a sonic celebration at 25 years. The best is yet to come. John Kay, Elliot Randall. This is super cool. Go back into this article here. And this is what I'm talking about, guys. Hot rodded amps were hot. Check this out. What do you think of these hot rodded Marshalls that have recently become so popular? This is a great answer you got. So this is what Jim said. In all probability, it's something I would probably do myself if it was the only way I could or I had to make money. Okay? So obviously these people have looked around and decided that the Marshall amplifier is a very popular thing to have and that they can do something to sell it to people. As in, I'll hot rod your Marshall amp and make it better or louder or whatever. They're making a lot of money doing something that's comparatively cheap to do. Some of the things behind what we're doing now with the Jubilee series sort of outlive these people's usefulness, and the Jubilees shouldn't need any hot rodding. Wow, the Jubilee was their answer, Marshall's answer to the hot rodded amps of that time, to all these Lee Jackson creations and everything like that. So they're like, you know what, we'll put our hat in that too. I mean, we're the ones that make the amp you're modding. Well, let's go for it. And that's what they get into. They're talking about that now. And one thing cool too is he says, on the more personal side of things, how do you feel about your major competitor over the years, Mr. Leo Fender? Or do you not even see him as a competitor? No, really great answer. No, I don't really. When I started selling amplification, which was around 1960, I listened to amplifiers, and my favorite then was the Fender without any doubt. It had a nice sound, but it's not the sound we have. We have a different sound. I don't knock any competition if it can be classed as competition because there's room for everybody. So I admire anybody that's successful at what they're doing. I don't really look upon them as competitors. Yeah, that's a healthy attitude. Very cool to see that. And he talks about some more famous and Marshall players that he likes. Now, this is a good question they asked. This is what the interviewer asked. Do you think today's younger players are in the same league with those players from the 60s? So you're talking about your Jimi Hendrix, talking about your Pete Townsend, talking about your Eric Clapton, all that kind of stuff. And his response is, well, it depends on what you're looking for. If you're looking for someone who's going to be remembered, they've got a problem. Because the people that start these things are always the ones that are remembered. They're the pioneers. I agree with that. What it could be taken as is no one at that point was, pioneer of anything, which I think probably not what he meant, because clearly Eddie Van Halen was pioneering literally 10 years before this. 9-10 years before. So then we go through some more here. I go over Jim's favorite Marshall. That's right, Jim Marshall's favorite Marshall. And what he says it is, past and present, it's always been the original 50 watt without the master volume controls or anything. Model number JCM 1987. He thinks there will always be a demand for them. Although it will be small, I think the people looking for that particular sound will always go for that. Very cool to see. So here it is. This is what the interviewer asked him. What has inspired the dramatic increase in value and interest of old Marshalls over the past few years? And we're talking Plexis, clearly in the 60s. These things are through the roof, right? And Jim goes, I don't know. Because really and truly, the modern amplifier we've built is far better engineered, and we use better quality components than we could ever afford to buy in the early days. Our buying power now is so great that we can buy the finest parts for the kind of price over companies would have to pay for cheaper ones because our orders are so colossal. So I can't really understand why the demand is so great for the amps made in the 60s. Check that out. I say with guitars. I've heard from countless people that guitars and, certain models made in the 60s and 50s were complete shitboxes compared to guitars of today. It's whatever floats your boat, whatever you like, whatever you dig. And it makes sense. And again, you can't argue, though, vintage is vintage. You can't get it anymore. It adds to the rarity, supply and demand. There's so many different factors as to why these guitars go up in value. And then a lot of players will tell you that they do sound better than anything today. So, I guess it is just personal preference, how you feel about it. I'm not knocking either. Then we go into here. We got Wayne Pedswater on studio bass playing. And studio musician, going over some stuff he has done with Robert Plant on his LP, the Honey Drippers, everything like that you look for in the studio. Here we go. The Marshall Model 2558 2x12 Jubilee Combo Amp, a hands-on report. And look what he says. This is pretty cool. So again, 25-year anniversary in amps. In a large part, these amps are a direct response to a three-pronged challenge, creating an amp that can simultaneously produce a warm yet highly detailed Marshall clean sound, crunchy soft clipping rhythm textures, and the supercharged distortion and liquid sustain implicit in the high-priced customized Marshall mods currently being done in LA and New York. That's exactly what I'm talking about. This was the hot rodding time. It was crazy. It was fast-paced, and Marshall was throwing their hat in the ring. Well, if you guys have one of these, let me know in the comment section below. Let me know how you like it, how it's held up. How's the maintenance been? Like, you had a lot of problems with it? Was it a reliable amp? Are you glad you still have it? Did you sell it back in the day, or do you regret doing that? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. Now, this is pretty cool. On tour with Jim Marshall. That's right, Jim Marshall went on tour. Says, since California is known as the home of the stars, it was fitting for Jim Marshall recently visited there as part of his worldwide Jubilee celebration tour. So in short, what's really cool about this is that he was going to guitar stores. He was doing clinics, signings. He would sign your Marshall. People out there have signed Marshall Jubilees by Jim Marshall himself. I can only imagine the value on those and what that price tag looks like. But he came to the States. He was touring everywhere. And here's some cool stories. He talks about his colorful history, introduction to supercharged special edition Jubilee amplifiers. Jim's visit produced many memorable individual moments. Ace Power guitarist Ted Nugent and Dave Amato thrilled the crowds in Hollywood by jamming together with Marshall dealer employees for nearly an hour. Swedish metal virtuoso Yngwie Malmsteen joined the bandwagon in Long Beach, where the crowds were so huge the counters the stars were standing on almost toppled over. Whoa, imagine that. Escaping unharmed, Jim and Yngwie partied till the early morning hours at several Hollywood nightclubs. Onlookers were treated to an impromptu arm wrestling match between the two giants of modern music. And that's what made the cover right there. Also said on a Marshall visit to Santa Ana, guitar prodigy Michael Angelo demonstrated a new Jubilee stack, and the crowd was subtly impressed by his unique two-handed double neck technique. Very cool stuff. And you see some quotes from some different players. You got Ted Nugent says, if you play as many Marshalls as I do, you should have a weapons permit. Okay, pretty cool one. David Mono goes, if you play guitar, you have to use Marshall. Otherwise, don't even play. But look at Yngwie's. Jim Marshall is such a cool dude. He's the only person that makes me pay for using his equipment. That's actually a good line. I'm catching some smart ass vibes. I think it though. It's funny. It's Yngwie. It's cool. He's a trip. So we still got to get Yngwie on this show. Oh my gosh, to have Yngwie on this show would be one off the bucket list. Maestro, you're out there. You're watching. You're listening. Please come to Masters of Shred. Be on Pages in Time. Let's go through your many iconic Shredconic classic magazine covers. And it would just be an absolute honor to have you on this program and hear your insight into such a magical time in this renaissance for the electric guitar. So please, it's out there. Our invitation. We'd love to have you on. You're the man, Yngwie. All right, let's go over to the next page here. Powerful new Marshall Jubilee rack mount bass amplifiers. Found a couple of those on Reverb. They weren't going for much 8 years ago, but I think that's probably changed today. And look, you get your Marshall at home. You want to get your Marshall Law promotional publication, you can get it done. You just got to fill this out and send it over, and they'll get it to you. And over here, a 1969 Marshall Super Tremolo 100 watt amplifier. I think it was actually somebody's amp. That was not Marshall's shot. It says amplifier courtesy of Steve McGustidian. I butchered that quite a bit. But I think that was his amp, and pretty awesome. I think actually, I believe we just tried one of those at Guitar Center here in Nashville with a mighty Tony Higbee. I may be wrong. I got to go back, look at that footage. I believe that's what he told me it was. And yeah, hearing those amps at full blast like we did, I mean, it's an experience. So again, with used gear, vintage gear, guys, if you don't have it, it's an experience. You got to at least go take like a Plexi, one of these older 60s Marshall heads, crank them all the way, let them rip through a 4x12. It's heavenly. Unlike anything I've ever heard in my life. Incredible. And that, folks, oh, how am I going to forget this? Steve Stevens, the only stack that matters in large, medium or small. Look at that. Boom, right there. Classic Marshall ad. And that is it, folks. That is it. That is the Volume 4, Number 2 Marshall Law promotional publication from Marshall featuring the Maestro and Jim Marshall on it. We have reviewed it. It's on Pages in Time. Let me know now what your guys' thoughts are on it. Did you have any of those amps in there? Did you ever sell any of those amps? Do you regret selling them? Do you still have them? Let us know your thoughts, your views, and your feelings. Also, do us a big favor. Subscribe to the channel. Grow with us. Show your support. Easiest way to support this channel. Shred the notification bell. Give this video a like. Share it with friends. Let me know what you want me to review. I got thousands of magazines in here in the Shred Den. Thousands. Maybe not thousands. I have about 1,000, okay? And if you'd like to contribute your vintage guitar magazines so we can have it on hand when a special artist comes to town and we can go get them on it, give you a shout out, give you a shred out, do me a favor, then send us an email over to info@mastersofshred.com, and we would love to give your awesome magazines a new home where they can live on forever on this channel. So very cool. Check that out. Appreciate your support. And also check out our Super Halen amps and, of course, our merch. I uploaded some really, really cool limited edition shirt designs up there now. In case you guys are wondering, this is pink. It's a very, very light pink. It is summer. I love 80s colors. And, folks, that's not all. I am rocking. That's right. Nike, Agassiz, let's go. Gotta love those. AirTech Challenge 2. It just goes. It just goes. So cool. I love my vintage sneakers. However, I did experience something really crazy because it's getting so blisteringly hot in Nashville, Tennessee, that my Nike Air Command, yes, the ones that you're famous for Woody Harrelson wearing inside White Men Can't Jump, I've actually separated from the soles. They were vintage, they are vintage, and it was so hot out that it actually separated the glue. I'm on the fence about vintage sneakers. That's another story. It's another time. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for being here for Pages in Time. Stay tuned, follow us on social media, and check out our community page on YouTube where we can interact more often. Come and get involved when we go live. And I'm going to go live a lot more with you guys, give you guys updates of what's going on, new gear, new interviews coming up, all that stuff. Thank you so much for watching this episode. Thank you for supporting the channel, and I'll see you next time on Pages in Time.